Last few weeks we have been talking about family, the church as a family, and we've discovered that in the time of Jesus, they lived a much different way than we did. They had a much different mindset than we did, where the group was more important than the individual, where their family was more important than their own plans and desires, that their village and that the church was more important than individual choices and decisions. And so last week we talked about how the individual identifiers, like their political leanings, even their gender or their marital status and all the rest, wasn't as important as their calling to be children of God and disciples of Jesus. And we saw how some of the disciples, they were far left and they were far right, and some like this, some like that, but they came together and they were united because they were all following who? Jesus, right? And so that unifier of their common pursuit of following Jesus made all those other things, though they were important still, secondary. And that brings us to this week. You're welcome to turn to Proverbs chapter 18. We'll be there in a couple minutes. Our current culture, our Western culture, has increasingly shifted away from relational, family, group-centered, and moved towards an individual-centered focus. I read somewhere this week that we have become a Chipotle generation. And initially I was really pleased to hear that, because I love Chipotle so much. Some of you have met my youngest child, Chipotle. Just kidding. I'm not that obsessed. But I love Chipotle. But what this author commented on was that Chipotle brought us options and choices to customize it just to our liking. And we like that with our burritos, but unfortunately we bring that into the rest of life, and we're like, oh, I don't want you, I don't want that, even though those might be needed things, and our focus is just our own preference and not necessarily what's best for everyone. Our society right now, as opposed to the time of Jesus, is primarily focused on pleasure seeking. Even the founding of this great country that we live in the United States was founded upon us being able to embrace life, liberty, and what's the third phrase there? The pursuit of happiness. That is what even this country is founded on, our individual opportunity to pursue what makes us happy, whether that means owning a home or working a job or having a business or having a family. The focus is doing what makes us happy. And so, in that pleasure-seeking, pleasure-focused society, 2020 has been a supreme disappointment and challenge. Because in many ways, the things that we want to pursue that make us happy have been limited or shut down. But for those of us that understand that the goal and purpose of life isn't just doing whatever you want so you can be happy, but that the goal of our lives is actually knowing God and being formed to be more like Jesus, we can look at this year differently. Plenty of disappointment, plenty of challenges, but I know that a lot of us have been shaped during this time. A lot of us have come to understand what actually really matters in life during this time. Because our lives aren't just about pleasing ourselves, it's about knowing God and having a relationship with others. And so, for the Christian, we don't ask the question, and it's so funny because my wife, in what she prayed this morning, wasn't aware of the points that I was going to make today in light of uncertainty and the things we've learned. But the people of God don't just ask the question in trial, will I make it? But we ask the question, who are we becoming? And who am I doing it with? Those are the questions we ask. Those are eternal questions. I heard someone say recently that we should care more about what's in our eulogy than on our resume. We should care more about what's going to be said at our eulogy when all of our life comes together than just be concerned about what we're doing right now. Isn't that a great line? And so part of this pursuit of God and our spiritual formation and maturity, part of that happens because we are with other people in a family. And so I want to read you an extended quote here from Joseph Hellerman from his book, When the Church Was a Family. And you can read this on your notes. It'll also be on the screen. You're going to want to follow along. And he wrote this. You can advance it as a read. Spiritual formation, right, becoming more like Christ, becoming more spiritually mature, occurs primarily in the context of, what's that word? Community. Community. People who remain connected with their brothers and sisters in the local church almost invariably grow in self-understanding, and they mature in their ability to relate in healthy ways to God and to their fellow human beings. This is especially the case for those courageous Christians who stick it out through the often messy process of interpersonal discord and conflict resolution. Long-term interpersonal relationships are the crucible of genuine progress in the Christian life. People who stay also grow. And so he's talking about, so much of our maturity as Christians happens because we're with each other. A lot of our growth and maturity and formation to be more like Jesus happens through relationships, and not just good ones, but even bad ones and trials. And he continues on and says this: people who leave do not grow. People who leave do not grow. We all know people who are consumed with spiritual wanderlust, but we never get to know them very well because they cannot seem to stay put. They move along from church to church, ever searching for a congregation that will better satisfy their felt needs. And listen to this. Like trees repeatedly transplanted from soil to soil, these spiritual nomads fail to put down roots and seldom experience lasting and fruitful growth in their Christian lives. And then there are those who leave to avoid working through uncomfortable or painful relations with others in the church family. Running away does provide immediate relief from the awkwardness of a hurtful relationship, but it is the easy way out in the short term. And there are legitimate reasons to leave a local church, but people who leave to escape the hard work of conflict resolution are often destined to repeat the cycle of relational dysfunction with another person in another church somewhere else in town. That's a powerful statement there. A lot of times we leave relationships, we leave churches, we withdraw from people because there's a conflict, or there's a struggle, or there's a disagreement, or there's a problem. And a lot of times our withdrawing, though it makes sense in many cases, is actually something that is limiting our ability to grow. When Dan Matat and I have an argument, or we have a conflict, and we stay together as friends, and we have hard conversations, we're better because of that. If you've ever been through something like that, can you say amen? If you've ever been through something like that, can you wave your arms out like this? Both arms. We need both arms. All right, move that body here. Okay. All right. Raise your hand if you've ever been in an awkward situation, an uncomfortable situation, and because you weren't spiritually mature, you withdrew. No, you don't have to raise your hand for that. But that's something that we do, and we pull back and we withdraw because we don't like the way it's working out. And a lot of times we just move to the next situation that seems better initially, but then guess what? As somebody once said, wherever you go, there you are. And your immaturity and your brokenness and your sin and your pride and your opinions are still there. And then he continues and says this: it is a simple but profound biblical reality that we both grow and thrive together, or we do not grow much at all. And so, church, I'm sharing these things with you this morning to remind you that not only do we need each other, but our spiritual growth is likely more dependent on each other than maybe we would like to admit or we even knew. I am a better disciple of Jesus if you're in my life, even the parts I don't like about you. Because guess what? Patience is a fruit of the Spirit, and you help me be more like Jesus, right? Those of you that are married know that that's the truth. right? You know that you rub each other sometimes, but those are opportunities where where it's revealed to you that you need God. Amen? Amen. Not that many amens on that last one. All right, you can see me after for some marriage discussion. And so, what we learn from this point, and we see in Scripture, and we've seen the last weeks, that sometimes just showing up is a big part of spiritual growth. Sometimes just showing up makes all the difference in the world. Turn to your neighbor and say, hey, sometimes just showing up makes all the difference in the world. Sometimes just showing up makes all the difference in the world. It does. It does. And so that brings us to Proverbs 18, verse 1. If you have a Bible in front of you, I'm going to read from the ESV this morning. And it says this: whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment. What does it mean to isolate yourself? To remove yourself, to separate yourself. A synonym of isolate is quarantine. Right? Where you get maybe forcibly put somewhere by yourself. Right? And so the Proverbs here is telling us that whoever isolates themselves seeks their own desire. It is very dangerous to isolate yourself from other believers. It really is. Do you know that? It's really important that you're around other Christians, that you're around other disciples, that you're with people that love God more than you do. Because here it tells us that whoever isolates themselves seeks their own desire and breaks out against all sound judgments. In times of my life when I have isolated myself, I find myself in the echo chamber of my own thoughts and beliefs. Because I don't hear your voice or God's voice, I hear my own voice. And I have been able to convince myself of some crazy things that if I had checks and balances in my life from other people, I wouldn't have believed those things. There have been sins I have rationalized in my life because I have been by myself, because I have isolated myself. There have been positions that I have taken that I would have never thought to take when I was amongst the community, where I could ask, what do you think I should do in this case? But when you isolate yourself, you're in danger. Isolating is a danger zone. Say that. Isolating is the danger zone. It is. It is. And in fact, it tells us that if we do that, we break out against all sound judgment. And I'm sure that initially when we think about isolating ourselves, we think about physically and bodily withdrawing. Right? I'm not here anymore. I'm on my own. I'm isolating. But don't you know you can isolate and show up at every meeting? Don't you know you can isolate and sit at that table every single night? You can isolate and be in charge. Because isolating is more than just physical. It's also something that we do in our hearts. We can withdraw emotionally. We can withdraw honestly. And it's just as dangerous to isolate our hearts and our emotions and transparency in our lives as it is physically. Now, it's dangerous physically, but you know, it's also dangerous to withdraw and isolate emotionally. Do you believe that? There's a lot of people in my life that are just like overly private. It's like they have major life moments happen, and you find out about it long after it's happened. Right? I'm not talking about the random person. I'm talking about people that I know, that I, on paper, would appear to be close with. There's an isolation. There's a withdrawing in their hearts and in their lives. And maybe it's something that I'm doing, but we are together, but there's still a disconnect because we're isolating. A lot of times, guys do this. Right? Ron and I our eyes just met. Uh-oh. Look away quick before we have a moment. Ah! Right? I think the guys of our church struggle with this. Can we be honest this morning, men, right? Sometimes we struggle with this, right? It seems like the guys are less connected about what's really going on in their lives than than the ladies a lot of times, right? We don't open up. We don't want to get in there. We'll talk about work all day. We'll talk about struggles in our employment all day. But like when we get down to like the heart of the matter, sometimes it's hard to do that. We don't like to do that. Right? And I'm not saying the guys, we just sit around and brush each other's hair and cry all day. Please don't do that. I'm not interested in that. But I just want to notice that guys, maybe we are isolated. Maybe we're withdrawing in relationships. It seems like the guys, many guys in our church just seem very content to, especially the married men, to be married and have like a work situation and that's it. Where there's been much more of a disconnect between the men during the pandemic than the women. And so, again, there may be good reasons, there might be bad reasons. I'm just sounding the alarm this morning that if it's true that we need each other to be more mature for God and more like Christ, then we have to be on guard against withdrawing both physically and emotionally. Can you say amen to that? Amen. Being a part of the family of God is God's design for us to grow. And so this morning, if you're watching or listening or here, if you have withdrawn, either physically or emotionally, I want you to ask yourself the question, why? And then I want you to really think about whether your why is a good reason. Now, I know there are some people not here this morning for good and godly and maybe health reasons. Totally get that. I respect that. I honor them. But let's ask ourselves this question, or maybe ask ourselves this question anytime we start withdrawing. I did not come to church today because... Why? I don't go to a small group or a home fellowship because... Why? Like, what's the reason why you don't go to a small group? That's a good thing to ask, and maybe it's a great reason. But I'd like you to think about your reason. Because if we need each other and those points of contact are going to make us more like Christ, and that's what you want, why are we missing those opportunities? I don't connect with Christians outside of the formal gathering because why? Those are good questions for us to consider. Let's look at one other verse, Proverbs again in 27. Flip on down to Proverbs 27. This is a well-known verse, Proverbs 27, verse 17. Iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. Anyone hearing this verse for the first time this morning? Anybody not hear that verse before? Right, okay. Iron sharpens iron, iron sharpens iron, and so one man sharpens another. Any blacksmiths here? No, right? Our most familiar understanding to iron sharpening iron is a knife and this sharpening steel. It's also called a honing steel. Joe, I thought about having you come up and just go, Joe loves sharpening knives. It's almost like a concerning thing. Right, Lena? You know, like Joe, anytime Joe has sharpened our serrated knives, which don't need sharpening in the same way. I mean, he just loves to sharpen knives. If you need your knife sharpened, you can see Joe Testa. Right? But the way a knife gets sharpened is by being rubbed with another piece of iron, another piece of steel, right? Maybe stainless steel or whatever it might be. This is how this knife is going to get sharp. This knife is not very sharp, right? This knife has not been sharpened in quite some time. I got to bring it over to Joe's house later. But this is how the knife gets sharp. And a knife is really only good if it's what? Sharp, right? That's the purpose of this knife. And so the knife needs to be sharpened. And so to sharpen the knife, it has to be sharpened against some other steel. That's what this verse means. And so for a knife to become sharp, it needs to be close. You can't sharpen a knife like this. All right? It's not a knife sharpening by faith. right? For these things to work, they have to be close. They need to interact, right? It's not just about being here and it's suddenly being sharp. They need to actually interact. They need to rub against each other. There needs to be movement involved. And I would imagine sometimes and in some cases when you're sharpening a knife, there will be some sparks that would fly. And maybe if you're sharpening a knife sometimes, there might be a little bit of friction that comes in. But you know what? The only way for this knife to get sharp is to be rubbed against this other piece of metal. It might get a little heated. But this is how the knife gets sharpened. This is how the knife gets formed to be useful. Without this, do you know what this is? Dull. Without the sharpening, this knife is dull and ineffective. And I'm not going to use it. I'm going to use one that's been sharpened. And the way it got sharpened was by rubbing against another piece of metal. I read as I was thinking about this that a lot of times the problem with the knife is that parts of the blade are bent over and out of shape because they've hit some hard things, like a bone or maybe like a pit in some fruit. And so actually the knife isn't so much needing to be resharpened because it's hit some hard things as it was being used. The metal bent over. And so what it needs is that other piece of metal to help straighten it out and get it back in place so that it can be useful again. And so the way that this knife becomes sharp and useful again is consistent and frequent points of contact. Consistent and frequent points of contact is what makes this knife useful. And it's what makes this useful too. This is pointless, but it's got a lot of purpose when we do that. And so that brings me to the last verse for this morning. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 23 through 25. And the writer of Hebrews says this: "Let us hold fast to our confession, to the confession of our hope without wavering. For he who promised is" what? Faithful. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. That's talking about you holding on to the promises of God because God's going to hold on to his promises. Verse 24, "And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good deeds, not forsaking our assembling together, as is the habit of some," right? Those isolators. "Not forsaking our own assembling together as the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." So church, the goal isn't just that we're together, right? The point isn't just that we're together and doing things like everybody else would be doing, right? People going bowling or a bunch of Christians going bowling isn't necessarily in and of itself going to change your life, right? The point is, what are we doing while we're together? What are we doing while we're bowling? What are we doing while we're meeting and together? So, listen, here's the progression we've made so far today and through these past weeks. God is reminding us that you can't grow without me, and I can't grow without you. You are going to become more spiritually mature if you commit to the community of other disciples, other brothers and sisters. It's critically important. None of what I'm saying is legalism. If you don't go to church, you're in trouble. The point of this is that we need each other. We need to be on guard against potential isolating. And when we're together, we need to sharpen each other. And part of that sharpening is done by encouraging one another and thinking how we can stimulate one another to love and good works. And so none of that happens just because you show up today. None of that happens just because you go to women's fellowship. None of that happens just because you go to a home group. None of that happens just because you make a phone call. None of that happens just because you're Facebook friends with other Christians. It will happen, though, if you and I take the time to consider how we can sharpen somebody else. And that takes the time and consistency of us rubbing against each other to make that happen. This week, I felt like I needed to talk to somebody and address an issue with something I was concerned about. And I have been praying about it for a while. And I felt like I was ready to go talk to this person about my concerns about them. And, you know, I don't always do this, but in this case, I thought I needed to talk to somebody. And I called Russ and I said, Russ, I was thinking about this. This is my concern. What do you think I should do? And, you know, I just knew that God wanted me to do this. I knew that God wanted me to confront this person and address the issue in their life. And I called Russ for a good check and balance. And I said, Russ, you think this is the right way to go? And he says, you know, I can see what you're saying, but you know what? And then he said this and this and this. And I tell you what, he was so right. What his counsel was actually that I shouldn't go and have the conversation with this person. And I got off the phone with Russ realizing that had I not checked with someone else before I ran in to do what I thought I was supposed to do, I would have destroyed my relationship with this person that I loved. But had I just gone on my own, even on my own just with prayer alone, I needed someone else to sharpen me. I needed someone else to rub against me spiritually and give me a perspective outside of just my own view. And as a result, I saved potentially my relationship with someone I love. Church, you're better together. You're better together. Your growth depends on God, but also depends on each other. And we'll close with this. This is from Charles Spurgeon. We have our praise team come up. He said this, perfect. If I had never joined a church till I had found one that was perfect, I should have never joined one at all. And the moment I did join it, if I had found one, I should have spoiled it. For it would not have been perfect. It would not have been a perfect church after I had become a member of it. Still imperfect as it is the dearest place on earth to us. Lord, we pray that you would help us to sharpen each other. I pray against the spirit of isolation. Help us to know the difference between withdrawing in heart and in body, and give us clarity on these things today, God. Help us to sharpen each other. Help us to encourage each other. Help us to be a family and a church and a community that is invested in each other to the point where we can encourage and provoke and stimulate each other to love and good works. I pray against the spirit of isolation, against the men and the women and the families. Lord, let us realize that we're better together and that we need each other. We thank you for being a good father to us, and come together as brothers and sisters in Jesus' name.